is the line before it. We there? Okay. So this passage, where he's going to end up tonight, and where I want to go with some corollary readings, is he's describing the fundamental nature, what sometimes in Buddhism is called zixing, or the essential nature, what we are in the deepest core of our being. And this is the understanding what that is, the realization of that is the enlightenment experience or the awakening experience of all sages and all the patriarchs and anybody who has a profound awakening. What they awaken to is this fundamental nature, the ground of their essential being. I don't know, there's many ways to translate, but in Chinese it's zixing, sometimes translated as self-nature, but I don't like that translation. So when they have the awakening experience to that, and it comes in different ways, there's many stories about how this happens. Sometimes it's slow, sometimes it's quick, but it's a stopper. They all of a sudden realize that any seeking outside their own nature is completely useless and wasted energy. That they have all they need to be completely whole and happy, not just in this life, in a worldly way, but in a much more profound way that goes beyond even life and death itself. This is the kaiwu, this is the awakening experience that the Buddha has, and when the Buddha gets this experience, the teaching of attaining that experience, or the teaching of how to go about replicating that experience, is what's called Dharma. It's the methodology that's passed along so that anybody who practices it eventually has that same experience or that same awakening. So when he says through, he finishes this line, cut through all that's keeping you from having that direct experience. That was his last line. Then he says, this no mind, this cutting away of this discursive false use or misuse of the mind is the right mind, is the proper mind, is the, in our sense here we're using it as the efficient mind, the one that works. It doesn't mean right in the moral sense or right in some kind of absolute truth sense, but it means this mind is the mind that will get you through. This is the mind that works, this right mind. And he says it's no mind. And then the next sentence is, one could say that being able to contemplate with this no mind, being able to see things through this no mind approaches the Buddha's wisdom. Now the problem with this is it's a language problem to some extent, because when, for the most part, we on one side of the thinking world, let's just say generally a Western approach, hear no mind, we hear negation. We hear a squelching, we hear almost like the turning off of the intellect, of the wit, of the vital energy. And we mistakenly think that this is then referring to a kind of hibernating, almost near terminal energy. When Carl Jung first heard of this, because it wasn't interpreted or translated, his first impression of Buddhism was it was a radical denial of existence. A radical denial of existence, because using the mind to acquire, to build, to expand, to grow, even in his theory, to find one's true self is an active, energized mind. And when he heard this being the highest state, this no mind, he first misunderstood it to mean a radical denial of all that he held dear. But of course later, some of you know his career, when he got to more deeply understand, he said, oh no, this is really very profound. And this is exactly where I've been trying to go with my studies and my liberating psychology. It's just stated in a different way. And what it means by stating it this way is the no mind means stopping the mind that interferes with your innate or intrinsic state of awakening. So it's posited that there's an inherent intrinsic state of awakening, bodhi, that is the the inheritance, if you will, or it's the bedrock of the being of all beings. This is our core. But through our activity of mind and confusion and emotions and desires and cravings and so on and so forth, this is what meant by mind activity. We cover over, we cloud that pure nature. And in clouding it, we find it almost inaccessible to us, which is where he started this essay. It's there, but we can't use it. And we can't use it because this habitual energy of mind, misuse of mind, covers it over. So what they mean by no mind is not a stopping or deadening of one's faculties, but a stilling or focusing or concentration of the mind to, in the state where there is no falseness arising, that original purity, that original stillness, that original joy is now completely arising without any effort. And that's why it says when the mind stops, it stills, when it's quiet, when it is no mind, that very stopping is wondrous existence, is the wonderfulness of life in its fullness. This very stopping is Bodhi. Okay? So when the sixth patriarch has his awakening experience, he awakens when he hears, and he's illiterate, by the way, so he's hearing someone recite a line from a sutra. Anybody know what sutra it was that he heard? What's called the Vajra or the Diamond Sutra. And probably sometime we'll do that as part of this class because it's a most profound and essential teaching. But he hears a line from this. And then later, when his awakening has progressed, and it progresses just by living in this monastery and thrashing rice. He's working at rice. He's just splitting wood and thrashing rice, but he's contemplating this notion that he heard in the sutra. Then, when he has his awakening, the patriarch, his teacher before him, comes to him, says, come, I'm going to check you out, give me an exam. And part of that exam is this fifth patriarch starts teaching him this sutra. And very early in the sutra, there is the line that he heard originally. And now when he hears it again, as his patriarch is reciting it to him, this awakening just goes kaboom, and it just stops him in his tracks, and he has a complete awakening experience. And then when he has that awakening experience, he almost says identically words in his own way that the Buddha said, Shakyamuni Buddha said, upon his enlightenment. Now, the Buddha is said to have said, how strange indeed, strange indeed, strange indeed. 3 times he says it to emphasize it. All beings have this Bodhi nature, this enlightened nature, and all can realize it. All can do the same thing I've just done. Only because of mind false, yo xin, this not the not mind, but the active mind, the false mind, the confused thinking, and then grasping, reaching out to hold on to, clinging. Do we cover it over and not realize it, says the Buddha. If you could stop these 2 things, you would have the same enlightenment experience I just had, the full awakening. So what the sixth patriarch says, the line he hears, anybody know what the line is? It's a good line to sort of, kind of plant in your consciousness, hoping that someday, all of a sudden you'll hear somebody say it and you'll say, oh, and you'll have an awakening. What's the line? The English translation is terrible, so we're going to just give the Chinese. We're going to say Chinese? No, English. Yeah, let's start with the Chinese first. Yes. Okay, so it's Ying Wu Suo Zhu, right? Art Sheng Qi Xin. Xin, right? So literally, if we try to translate it, you should to nothing zhu, dwell. Okay, this is it. So to nothing or to nowhere dwell, and then raise up this mind. So constantly keep a mind that clings to nothing. That's a good English translation. Constantly generate a mental attitude that clings to nothing and sets up no place. Now, setting up is the jewel. It's making an attachment, making an identity to all the various things that we call me or mine. And he's saying the absence of that setting up, the absence of that clinging, goes back to the Buddha's experience, is not dull emptiness, it's not non-existence, but it's actually liberation. So when my teacher talks about the passage of this in the Vajra Sutra, he says, and this is where we're going, I'm trying to equate some terms here. He's saying the ju, the dwelling, the non-dwelling, is the same as non-attaching. So that's, in Chinese, what's the attachment? Wu, zhi, right? Zhi. I thought it was zhi. Right. Right, not G. We have Taiwanese and Mandarin pronunciations here. So, zhi. And the root of that word comes from the Sanskrit, graha. So, graha is, now I'm getting closer, graha is a word we use for the root of grabbing, graha, grabbing, grasping. So non-attachment, means not grabbing, not grasping. So only because of confused thinking and grabbing, my teacher used to say sticking, like glue. Sticky, sticky, you stick to everything, like glue. And then he was delighted when we find, that was back in the 70s, Velcro just came out. And he thought that was really neat. And he'd open and close it. Someone gave him some sandals with Velcro on. And he'd say, likey this. Everything you, like Velcro, sticking. I pull you apart, you stick together. You know, he would say, this sticky mind like Velcro. So he'd really use kind of graphic metaphors. So he'd say what non-dwelling is just non-attaching. And non-attaching, then he'd say, is jieto. It's liberation. It's independence. It's zidzai. It's nirvana. So immediately he goes from not grasping, not dwelling, and he says this is also the same as wunian, wuxiang, wuxian, no mind. So no mind, no thought, no grasping, no dwelling, they're all different expressions for the same thing. Just don't set up, don't grab, don't hold. So used in this way, that's why he says it approaches the Buddhist wisdom. Okay? Yes? I'm working on it now because Hung Shan and I are doing a retranslation. But I think it literally says, should, it's good to, nothing dwell, raise up this mind. So basically, keep a mind or hold to a mind that clings to nothing and sets up nowhere, if you want to double translate it. But it will help you with the translation to know that both in the commentaries to the Vajra Sutra and in my teacher's commentaries, they use interchangeably non-dwelling, non-attachment, no mind, no thought. So you can see that there's different ways they're expressing it, but they're expressing the same concept. And that really helps us in translating. And I think it also helps psychologically understand what's going on here. So my teacher would take it back in a sequence. You're grabbing and holding on, you're dwelling, okay, is also used for family and household and marriage. Sorry. Okay, the same graha is used as root word for family, household, marriage, property. Interesting. Okay, so you're setting yourself up and identifying with those things. I am these things. I am these relationships. I am this career. Okay, wherever you set up is setting up in a bubble that's going to pop because it's a conditioned dharma. So before you set up, though, there's grasping, there's attaching. But before there's grasping and attaching, so there's dwelling, but before there's dwelling, there's grasping and attaching. What comes before grasping and attaching in the sequence? Qiu, seeking. Okay? And before seeking comes desire. And before desire comes avidya, or wuming. So if you look at the process, the misunderstanding, the fundamental misunderstanding where you think, I don't have this, I'm not whole and complete, I lack, I'm insufficient, I need. That is Ming, that's avidya in Sanskrit. That basic misunderstanding then leads to desire and fear. Yu. And desire and fear then lead to wanting and reaching out, grasping, attaching. And grasping and attaching then lead holding, dwelling, securing. So if you're cultivating, you can intervene at any one of those points and begin to tie it back to the fundamental nature of the liberation. You get where I'm going? So if you understand where the teachings come, they'll say, don't seek for anything. My teacher would say, at the place of seeking nothing, there's no worries. No, you thought, at the place of seeking nothing, I won't get anything. No, he said, no, there's nothing to get. Han Shan says the same thing. There's nothing to get. You have everything you need. Thinking you need to get something covers over what you already have, and you don't get anything anyhow. So in another part of the text, the disciples asked the Buddha, so we should break all our attachments, right? And the Buddha said, no. Well, what do you mean? And the Buddha said, there's nothing you can attach to. How could you break it? And at that point, that disciple got awakened, because the idea was, my grasping and attaching secures me. It makes me whole and complete. And the Buddha said, whatever you're grasping and attaching to is like dreams, illusions, bubbles, and shadows. It's conditioned things. None of this you can hold. You can't hold your house. You can't hold your car. You can't hold your youth. Right? So even the holder is impermanent. So the Buddha's saying the misperception is thinking you can grab and get something. That's part of the Ming, part of the avidya. So he's actually pushing it back again and again. So if you go in at no seeking, you see a gate of liberation through no seeking. If you go in at non-attachment, you can intervene at that along the continuum. You can go in at dwelling and examine that. So part of your meditation topic can be, where am I grasping and attaching? Where am I setting up and dwelling? Where am I, like in a sense, where am I taking refuge? What do I put my stock in? And how reliable is that? Or you can go into, what are my desires and cravings? Or what is my deepest misunderstanding? This sense of lack. So when the patriarch has his enlightenment, he says, how unexpected. 3 times, 4 times, how unexpected. This fundamental nature is pure, in and of itself, intrinsically. This fundamental essential nature is unborn and undying. Unborn and undying. It doesn't come or go. Not produced, destroyed is the way we've translated, but it means unborn, undying. It doesn't lack anything. How unexpected. And so on and so forth. Okay? So I wanted to stress this, because if we just left it with no mind, no thought, without stressing the positive dimension, the absolute positive dimension that's underlying this, we'd make the same mistake Jung initially did and think, oh, this is talking about kind of dying to life. And that's not what it means. Okay, so we go on. He says, all of the teachings, everything the Buddha taught doesn't go beyond this essentials that I just laid out. This is so clear. Trust to this, and that's all you need to succeed. And then he says something very interesting. The only difference between us and the sage, a Buddha, a Bodhisattva, an Arhat, is that the path of the ordinary person and the path of the sage is just a difference between being confused or not being confused. There's no essential difference. It's not like the spiritual IQ of a Buddha or a sage is greater than ours, if you want to use that measure. Or whatever the genetic wherewithal or the capacity or the talent is greater. And that's why the sixth patriarch is such an interesting case study, because he's illiterate. So someone can be very learned and attain awakening, and someone can be illiterate and attain awakening. It doesn't have to do with that. It doesn't have to do with male or female. It doesn't have to do with east or west or any of that. So he says, and the only difference is the path of the ordinary person is whether one's mind is clear or confused. All wholesome and unwholesome karma comes from this mind. Now this is very important. All of the actions that we do and the effects of those actions that create our life and our destiny all come from this very same mind. This inner process of our thoughts and our feelings, checked or unchecked, That's what he's mapping out here. It doesn't come from the divine. It doesn't come from some external agency, fate, or God. And even karma is not a bestower of punishment or rewards as if it's an impersonal being. It's merely the way things work. But they're working out of and returning to the mind. So karma is generated from the mind, it's carried by the mind, and it's recreated by the mind. Then he says, this is the gist of it. It is. Okay, now the next phrase, this is really wonderful. It says, you see, because now he's coming back, this original state of our wondrous nature. So now he's saying, yes, we get lost, we get confused about whatnot, but the wondrous state, the wondrous nature, this is it, whole and complete. In and of itself, it needs no awakening, and yet how does it get confused? So what he's saying is essentially, and I'm going to read you passages tonight if there's time, others say the same thing. Originally, it's just this way. How do we get lost? How do we get lost? And again, my teacher would always push back to that question. How did you get lost? If you can understand how you got lost, you've solved the riddle. Trace back your steps. Where is it that you went wrong? And knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back. Do you remember this poem? Two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry could not be when traveler and long I stood and looked down both to where they bent in the undergrowth. And I took the one instead of the other, and thinking, well, I could come back sometime to maybe explore the other one. But he says, but knowing how way leads on to the way, I doubted if I'd ever come back. So in the cultivation process, you are going back to where you diverged from your original nature. And it's tangled, okay? It's really tangled. But you can find your way back. That's the premise. What we now call confusion is simply a matter of not clearly understanding that our own mind fundamentally lacks nothing. This is the important part. I think it's really important. The confusion is this sense of insecurity, this sense of inferiority, this sense that I am not whole and complete, that there's something missing. He's saying that this is a false thought. This is a wrong thought. This is a misperception. And once you don't catch that misperception, you're down a road, galloping along, accumulating, acquiring, grabbing, worrying, fretting, thinking that you're not going to get it to fill the hole that isn't there. And the irony is that the more you get, the more it doesn't fill the hole. And so it becomes a vicious cycle. And he's saying this sense of lack is fundamentally at the root of the problem. Not realizing that our body, mind, and world are basically an illusion, we tie ourselves up in this confusion. Now we come to the last passage. We have for so long been caught up and seen through this false consciousness, which comes and goes. We see it as real. So now, what he's saying is, through habituation, we now have come to take the false for the true. And the true has gotten lost in the shuffle. So originally, there might have been some clarity and some not clarity. But as we further get galloping along, and we do get caught up in this, this is the famous Jataka story I told you that's based on Chicken Little. So the Chicken Little story comes from the Jataka tale where the animals all start stampeding because sky is falling. I lack. I'm not whole and complete. And then we start the gallop. And everybody, you look around, everybody's galloping. Now we're worried they're going to get ahead of us. We're galloping, they're galloping. Everybody says, why you're galloping? Because the sky is falling. It's going to come down on us. And so then we start to compete with each other to get ahead in a race for nothing. We're just spooked, like horses on a stampede. So the Chicken Little story is derived from the Jataka story. I think I was trying to remember who. I think it was the monkey. Yeah, the monkey was the first one. Who was the first one? I'm not Chicken Little now, the Jataka. Yeah, I think it was a monkey, and a breadfruit fell out of the tree. And the monkey freaked out and looked at it all broken. He said, that's the sky falling apart. It's coming down. And he shrieked. And of course, the next animal said, what's wrong? He said, the sky's falling. And this was before critical thinking. And so, and these are the same people that advertise politicians. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. So Madison Avenue says, gets this thing going, the sky's falling. Everybody believes it. I saw it on TV. I read it in a magazine. Everybody's moving around like the sky's falling. It must be falling, right? And people are saying to you, how come you're not running and you're getting ahead in life? And you're saying, yeah, how come I'm not? And right away you buy into this without even thinking. Well, what is there to get ahead of? I'm born, I age, I die. Getting ahead where? Getting ahead to die faster? I mean, where am I going? Well, you gotta have a living. Yeah, you need some food, clothes, and sleep. But every study shows beyond the basic requirements of that, more getting doesn't add more at all. There's a famous Yale study that was done 5 years ago. Once you reach the basic sufficiency, food, clothing, and sleep and whatnot, which is very much moderated than people think. We're not talking about 7, 8 figures here. Beyond that, anything you try to add to that doesn't increase any quotient of happiness or security. In fact, it's inversely proportional. The same is true if you don't have enough, though. Okay, so middle way. Enough. That's enough. Enough should be enough. But when we have enough, we don't think it's enough because everybody's telling us it's not enough. The house isn't big enough. 1 car is not enough. 2, you need 2. Not enough kids. Not enough grandchildren. Oh, no, it goes on. Whatever you look at, Las Vegas wins on this. When do people have enough gambling? They don't. If they win, they think, wow, I could win more. It's not enough. If they lose, they say, wow, I got to gain it back. This is why the house always wins. And we do the same thing with our life. There's never a point we have enough. I talk to undergraduate students of mine. I say, what's enough? Is a major? No, double major. Is a double major? No, triple major. When's enough? Some people stay in school for all their lives. When's it enough? What's enough sleep? What's enough food? Just these simple things, but this is what drives it. It's really, really subtle how it gets going. And then we get on this frantic path where we're just so busy, so running, and getting what? And yet there's never this sense of, I've got enough finally. I finally got enough. And then when you're lying there in bed and fading out, no matter how much you've acquired, now it's too much. Because none of it's useful. You can't take any of it with you. You can't even use it in your last moments. 1 blanket, maybe that's enough then. Yeah. So in any event, he says, this false consciousness gets going. Therefore, the 6 dust in the conditioned world, sight, sound, smells, taste, the things we grab at, the things we fantasize about, the 6 dust, merely illusory, we mistakenly take as real. So this is where we stop with this passage. Now, in the second passage, he's going to go around and bring out the methodology for breaking out of this self-styled, this self-made cocoon that we've wrapped ourselves in. So that's the second. So tonight what I wanted to do was to share with you, in the time we have left, Locke, did you get the latest one I sent? Yeah, the Zhuangzi? Okay, can you call up Walt Whitman first? We'll do Whitman first. I like Walt. Not today. Some time ago. It's just a 4-line passage from Walt Whitman. Can you find it? Everybody knows who Walt Whitman was? I won't say is. If I said is, some people would still think. Walt Whitman. Hath there never come a time? No? See, I send him a lot of stuff and then I don't use it. There we go. Okay, so Walt Whitman, one of the things Whitman does, Whitman's an early American poet, probably one of the most foundational poets of American literature. But one of the things Whitman does is he becomes a medic during the Civil War. And as some of you know, the Civil War was extremely bloody and brutal. Extremely bloody and brutal. Battles would take place in one day in which 30 to 40,000 people would just die on a single day. More people died in the Civil War than died in all of World War II and World War I. Yeah, you don't realize this. Americans in the Civil War, more than died in World War I and World War II combined. So he is there, and of course the medical ability at this time is extremely primitive and limited. They were sawing off limbs in the field with the same kind of saws you make houses with, without any anesthesia. And the bullets were these huge things that just rip holes through people, rip off their arms, shred their arms. They would just hold them down while they were screaming and saw these arms off and try to, what do they call there's a word, cauterize. So you cauterize it, and those are the ones you could save. People just, and he was a medic in this time. And so he saw the flower of youth go into battle, heroic, youthful. They would even have crowds come out with picnic lunches to watch it. They thought it'd be over within a week. So in Washington, when the first big battle outside Washington, D.C. occurred, all the lovely men and women came out in their carriages and set up on the hillside with their picnic lunches to watch the war. Because they thought it would be just this kind of game. And of course, quickly, it went on for 4 years. Very, very bloody, and it didn't end. Okay? He, at some point, saw all of these things, and at one point wrote this verse. Can you read it? Hast there never come a time to thee an hour? Have you never had a moment or time, a sudden gleam divine, almost like a spiritual insight, precipitating, bursting? Whoa. You can see I'm a real yogi. Precipitating, bursting all these bubbles, dreams, illusions, bubbles, shadows, contemplate them thus. Fashions wealth. So he's saying all the things you strive after. Hasn't there come a time when this bubble burst? This eager business aims that we do with our lives, books, politics, art, amours. What's amours? Love. All you need is love, okay? Right? Even love to utter nothingness, okay? Hasn't there come a time when you've had an experience before you pass away where you see through this, you see, what does this all amount to? Meo, nothing, okay? So this is his contemplation. He's not a Buddhist, but he's saying even in the health of his life, he could see where things were going, where things were tending. Okay, now let's turn to the Taoist, and this is Zhuangzi. I like Zhuangzi. Zhuangzi is very cool. Okay, he's the one that does the dream of the butterfly. Remember that one? Was it Zhuangzi was dreaming of a butterfly, or the butterfly was dreaming of Zhuangzi? Remember the line I quoted you last night? You use a snare to catch a rabbit. Once you catch a rabbit, you can get rid of the snare. He's got some really great, but this is one of them. He's doing a similar contemplation here, okay, way before Whitman. Let's see, I think I have the same passage. Okay, is there such a thing as perfect happiness in the world, or isn't there? Now, this is coming, once you start the feeling of lack, this is where you're going. I lack, how can I be happy? Okay? Is there some way to keep yourself alive, or isn't there? Oops. Well, wait a minute. What? No, I know other people die. Yeah, well, you die too. Is there some way to keep yourself alive? This is a very simple question. During the debate, one could have said to the other, I have a simple question. Is there a way to keep yourself alive or not? Boom. That's a really good question. What to do? What to do? What to rely on? What to avoid? What to stick by? What to follow? What to leave alone? What to find happiness in? What to hate? Whoa. So, before you finish college, you should answer these questions. These should be on any final exam. Okay? This is what the world honors. He says, okay, let's look at it. This is what the world really thinks is special. Wealth, eminence, Hollywood, cosmopolitan, YouTube, long life, a good name. This is what the world finds happiness in: a life of ease, rich food, fine clothes, beautiful sights, sweet sounds. And this is what the world looks down on: poverty, meanness, early death, and a bad name. And this is what it finds bitter: a life that knows no rest, a mouth that gets no rich food, no fine clothes for the body, no beautiful sights for the eye, and no sweet sounds for the ear. Now, people who can't get these things fret a great deal and are afraid. This is called, by fear here, it's also anxious, anxiety. Fretting and fearing is anxiety. Our modern translation of that is anxiety, stressing out. Okay? This is a stupid way to treat the body. Now, this is shun, so you can translate this as a stupid way to treat yourself or to treat the body. People who wear or are rich wear themselves out running and rushing around on business, piling up more wealth than they could ever use. This is absolutely true. It's absolutely true. We are in a state, most people have so much money, well, not most people, there's a lot of people, actually it's a very small percentage who've gotten to the top. They have so much money, they're in a manic overindulgence. They cannot buy enough. It's a manic overindulgence. It's just driven. They can't stop buying. And they just acquire and acquire and acquire, and they don't even know what they have anymore. They wear themselves sort of running around on business, piling up more wealth than they could ever use, more property, more investments. This is a superficial way to treat the body or treat yourself. People who are eminent, famous, well-known, spend night and day scheming and wondering if they are doing right. And this is a shoddy way to treat yourself, your body. Man, people, live lives in company with worry. And if you live a long life while, still you're dull and doddering. You can't avoid. So you pile it all up. By the time you're 65, you really know how to really lay it in there. And you can't stay awake even to enjoy it. At 70, it's even worse. So there you got it. You're piling up, and you're doddering, you can't walk, and now you're looking for new body parts. Or Viagra, or whatever. Okay? To keep the dull and doddering away. Spend so much time worrying instead of dying. That's a great line. Then you spend so much time worrying instead of dying. Why don't you just die? Instead of just living in worry. The coward, let's see. The hero dies but one death, the coward 1,000 times. Shakespeare. This is a callous way to treat the body, and so forth. This is Zhuangzi. So Zhuangzi is saying, I'm not going to quote you the other side, he's saying, originally, our minds love and cherish purity, but our thoughts, the xiang, disturb the mind, the sense of lack, and we then disturb our innate purity. The mind, the spirit of people, our natural spirit, loves or cherishes stillness, but our desires disturb and entice it away. These are the first two lines he's talking about. So the mind loves purity, thoughts disturb it. Our spirit loves stillness, but our desires, our cravings, driven by sense of lack, entice the spirit away, it gets disturbed. And we're no longer at peace with ourselves. Whether we have or don't have, we're not at peace. Because if we don't have, we want. And if we want more. Or if we get more, we're going to fear we're going to lose what we have. And so never mind what side you're on. It just doesn't work out. This is the disturbed spirit. And psychologically, it sort of describes not only that time, but clearly modernity. If you want to say one characteristic when you go out and you feel the vibe, you're feeling the disturbed spirit. Anxiety, anxiousness, a kind of hyper-longing, never satisfied. And these devices that we have now to increase our capacity to have only increase the hype. Okay? So the texting, the tweeting, the constant, am I missing out? Did I miss something? Is something happening? And I'll download it and look at it later. And so people are actually missing out on the experience here now, downloading it so they can have it later. But later, they're downloading more, and so there's a constant missing out, but a constant accumulating. I mean, it's getting crazy. I mean, imagine what Zhuangzi would have to say about that. I mean, he was talking about people just casually going about making money and being confused. He wasn't even talking about the hyperness. So let's go on. A little time here. Now I'm going to read you a Buddhist part. So now this one is saying, I won't even tell you where this is from. This is from a sutra, actually. Okay? And I couldn't get it up because I couldn't find it and I didn't have time to type it out. I was too busy. But basically what the text is saying, originally the enlightened nature is whole and complete. We lack nothing. Everything's okay, no problem, as my teacher would say. Everything's okay, no problem. But, and here I'll read it too for a while and you'll get the drift of it. Still, nonetheless, people of the world persist in their foolish and shallow ways. They quarrel among themselves over matters of no urgency. Even as they live amidst dire evil and extreme suffering, they overwork their bodies, straining themselves to gain a livelihood. You say, well, I am making a living, but I'm actually not living. In the making of living, I'm not living. High and low, poor or rich, young or old, male or female, they all worry the same about their money and wealth. The haves and the have-nots are all the same. They all worry anxiously to some degree. They're always agitated and troubled. Their worries pile up, their apprehensions accumulate. They're driven by their own fearful thoughts. They do not have a single moment of peace. If they have a field to till, they worry about the field. If they have a house to live in, they worry about the house. They worry in the same way about their cows, their horses, any of the domestic animals, about their servants, money, wealth, clothing, food, and household things. Add to the list. What do we worry about? Well, you're saying, I'm really liberated because I don't worry about my servants and I don't worry about my cows or horses or my domestic animals. Right, because he's talking about an agrarian time. So what's the equivalent now? Huh? I can't hear you. Oh, I can worry about my cell phone. I worry about my connection. I worry about my internet. I worry about my cars, bikes, motorcycles, skateboards. Huh? Stuff? Stuff. Yeah, all my stuff. And then I buy a storage place to put up stocks. Oh, okay, stocks or stuff. Stocks. Yeah, my stocks. Okay, my degrees, my clothes. And then you buy a storage to put it all in so you can buy more, so your house isn't filled up. Okay. And again, they pile worry upon worry, sigh upon sigh. They live in apprehension, stress, and fear. Calamity occurs unexpectedly. Floods and fires, robbers, enemies, and creditors. They burn down and wash away, plunder, crush, and destroy everything human beings have. The poison of apprehension torments them unrelentingly. Anger burns the mind. Worry and toil never leave. Feelings harden. Desires stiffen. But these people are never able to let go of their anxiety. And it also happens that because they are broken by such events, their bodies perish, their lives come to an end. Abandoning all they have, they leave, and no one goes along with them. The noble and the wealthy are also afflicted by these apprehensions with the myriad woes and fears. Their toils and hardships are like those of others. They suffer also from alternating chills and fevers. It's talking about illness. The poor and depressed, the low and the humble suffer deprivation, constant want. They don't have a field in which to plant crops. They desire to possess. It causes them anguish. If they do not have a house to live in, their desire to possession causes them anxiety. Lacking cows and horses and stocks and blah, 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 and iPads and iPhones and, all of that, household things. Their desire to possess them causes them stress. If they happen to possess something, they feel they lack something else. When's enough? There's another by Lao Tzu saying, 知足常乐. happiness is just knowing when to stop, when there's enough. If they gain possessions of the other thing, then they would feel they still lack another thing. They want to possess everything equally. The moment they obtain the object of their desire, they consume and squander it. Although they may anxiously toil in this manner, seeking to obtain what they want, often they cannot get possession of anything. So, although they may have a desire and the aspiration, they can't obtain what they want. Both mind and mind are exhausted. Sitting or standing, they can't find peace or rest. They can't sleep at night. But we have pills. Worrying thoughts follow one after the other. They toil and hardships are like those of others, and they suffer, and so on and so on and so forth. This goes on. This is a wonderful, long passage. It's basically describing how the Bodhisattva sees dukkha, the suffering of human existence, not just material, but psychological and spiritual. And from this comes the resolve to stay in the world, to teach and transform, and to cause people to leave this behind. So it's not a given that this is the way it has to be, but the text is saying this is what we make of our initial pure land, our initial pure state. We turn into this, and it can be returned and gotten back to. So the text here is mapping out a long description, which I think the language is pretty modern. I mean, most of what I was reading to you doesn't seem like this is very long ago. Yes? Okay. This is from, some of you already know it, you've read it. This is from the longer Amitabha Sutra. So the shorter sutra is the one we recite as part of our ceremonies here every day, but the longer one goes into great descriptive detail about the difference between the Pure Land and the not. But remember, the essential teaching, the Pure Land is a pure mind. Okay? The essential patriarchal teaching is there is no Pure Land outside of a pure mind. So this mind that Han Shan's talking about returning to is in fact the Pure Land. It's not something you go to circumventing the mind. But the Pure Land and the hells, if you want to use that language, are both from the same mind. That's why he says between an ordinary and a sage, there's no difference, just between confusion and awakening. This is really important to understand. Okay? And I've told this story a number of times when somebody asked my teacher once, we were having passages like this, and they brought forth a resolve to be born in the Pure Land. And so they asked, now they were worrying because they were reading, they wanted to be born in the Pure Land because it sounded a little bit like, you know, the maxi condo at some place, near a mall, you had servants to wait on you, and anything you're tired of could be quickly taken away and changed into something better. So it was a constant ascending high, a rush. That's how they saw the Pure Land. But then they were reading that the Pure Man is just the pure mind. Oh, let's see. I was hoping I could get there without having to do any work on my mind. Is there some kind of special door I can go through, or credit card I can use to get in without purifying? And they were wondering, so they asked my teacher, is the Pure Land a real place, or is it just a state of mind? And the teacher's answer was yes. And it completely stopped. So I'll just leave that with you. Is it an actual place or a state of mind? He said yes. 有什不同. Okay, enough for tonight. Next week we're going to go into the new section where Han Shan really gets into the practice of how to cultivate, how to turn this, how to make a Pure Land sort of your existential reality. Any things that need to be announced coming up? Just who went to the Guanyin? Anybody back? Suzanne went. And what do you have to report? You felt cleansed. Not bad. Did your anxiety level go down a bit? A little bit. Just to not have it go up or down is already a profound state. To reduce it a little bit is like, whoa. Okay. Anybody else go? And? What do you have to report?
It's really good.
Really good.
I feel like there's a lot of kind of, yeah, you do feel kind of cleansed. Then, all my habits just kind of came back after the session after 1 week.
You like them so much. Now I'm repeating my teacher. I had a similar experience, and he said, they don't come back, you invite them. Because you love them so much. You've been together for so long with your bad habits. You can't bear to part with them. Even a week, he says, you start to get lonely. No, he was like pushing on me that way. No, but the teaching was the same. They came back. He would say, no. They don't have any energy of their own. They can't come back. You didn't let them go. Oh, wham, that hurt. You know. But by the way, reciting the name of Guanyin or reciting the name of Amitabha is in fact called the mind cleansing pearl. So when you both mention cleansing, I just want to say in the text themselves, they talk about if you can single-mindedly recite, it's like cleansing your mind. It's like after a rain comes, the air and the sky and everything is cleansed, because when you're reciting single-mindedly, you are wunyan, no thought. And no thought automatically, the purity returns by itself. You don't have to get it. So the very fact that you recite single-mindedly and stop the mind from wandering, the natural energy just returns by itself, and that's the feeling of cleansing and purity. It's really quite wonderful. So if you ever have a chance to do this, take advantage of it. Oh, you can either what they recited was Namo Guan Shi Pusa, right? And it's actually Namo Guan Shi. Guan Shi means contemplating the sounds of the world bodhisattva. So it's traditionally the bodhisattva, great compassion or mercy. And usually it's neither male nor female, but often represented as a female figure. So it's a greatly compassionate bodhisattva. And you invoke that name. So the waters of compassion just sort of come from your being, start to well, and they just cleanse away. And so by reciting that name single-mindedly, you just, no other thought, you just lose yourself. Namo Guan Shi Yin Pusa. There's an actual beautiful chant that you do. It's done rhythmically. And people do this, how long?
2-3 hours.
Right.
For a period, I guess.
Right. So you enter a kind of meditation samadhi, it's called, of recitation. No other thoughts, you're not talking to anybody else, you're just simply concentrating, repeating that sound. It starts to cleanse the system. It's really quite... Next time I'll tell you a story. I was telling a nun this last week because she was asking about Guanyin Bodhisattva, and I have a lot of affinities because that was how I came in, was through a response with Guanyin Bodhisattva. But she was asking, were there ever experiences that you had of seeing Guanyin Bodhisattva, actually seeing Guanyin Bodhisattva? And I said, well, in dreams and stuff, but I actually heard. She said, what, you heard? And then I told her the story. So I'll maybe tell you later. Yes? Oh, should we demonstrate? I will try. So if you want, this is how it goes. We'll do 7. Namo Guan Shi Yin Pusa. 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 that's the recitation, and it's done over and over and over again with the bell and the fish. And you do it, usually we used to do it walking for a half an hour, sitting reciting for a half an hour, and then sitting a half an hour silently reciting just internally, and then getting up and repeating this process. At night you start to go to sleep, and that's the sound. It's going through, you wake up, it's sound. It takes a while to cleanse, because what you're cleansing out is all the little cartoons and little ditties of ads that you've memorized, and all that stuff's in there, you know, it's like, it's just amazing. And so Guanyin's, the water of Guanyin recitation is cleansing, it's flushing out the tubes of all the accumulated stuff that's, you've eaten. You eat with the eyes, you eat with the ears, and so forth, so you've accumulated all this stuff, and it's all in there. So sometimes the first experience you have is not of purity. It's like, oh my God, the garbage. Because just in reciting a few times, you can see how much is there. But over a while, it starts to cleanse out. Wonderful. Okay, so we'll do the transference in English. San Bao